Welcome to Teaching Truth. For many people, the fear of flying in an aeroplane is a very real and genuine fear. For me, in my younger years, I used to have a fear of flying, but with help and with encouragement, I eventually overcame that fear. Had I allowed fear to range unchecked, I would never have had experienced the exhilaration of flying at 36,000 feet and looking down on the snow-capped Alps. Had I allowed fear to range unchecked, I would never have had experienced the exhilaration of flying across the Atlantic Ocean and visiting the United States of America. Had I allowed fear to range unchecked, I would never have flown to places like Gran Canaria and Malta to enjoy summer holidays in the sun. Fear affects joy. Just as fear would have affected my enjoyment of flying had I allowed it to range unchecked, fear can affect the joy that we can experience, the joy that God wants us to have. Fear destroys joy. Fear gnaws away and eats away at joy. And therefore, fear, if left to range unchecked, can cripple, can paralyze the joy-filled lives that God wants us to have. Giving in to fear can be a real joy killer. Now, notice what I'm saying here, that fear in and of itself is not a bad thing. But actually giving into fear and allowing fear to range unchecked can then become a bad thing. Many people allow fear in the mind, and that's why we are to guard our minds and to have our minds renewed, because a lot of fear is driven from the mind. And we often can think, and let's be very honest with you, who among us hasn't thought, what if? What if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if we end up doing this, or what if this affects us in this way? What if? More often than not, what if never actually happens? And we can allow fear and worry to cripple us and to create within us that loss of joy. When we live in fear, the power of the what if can become overwhelming in our lives. And as a result, we can go through our lives without that deep joy that only Jesus can give. Joy and fear are incompatible. They are not good bedfellows. Joy and fear are incompatible. Now let me again come back to Peter in the story. Had Peter not stepped out of the boat and walked on the water and engaged his fears and was very honest about his fears, he cried, "Lord, save me." He was fearful in that moment, but he turned to Jesus, the only one who could help him address his fears. Had Peter not stepped out of the boat, had Peter not felt his fears, he would never have had experienced the exhilaration of walking on water with Jesus back to the boat. An experience that the 11 other disciples who were huddled in the boat never actually encountered. And why was that? Well, the 11 other disciples did not step out the boat, did not see the wind in the same way that Peter did not feel the fear in the same way that Peter did. Peter stepped out the boat. He felt the fear. But he, I dare say, recognized in that moment when he cried, Lord, save me, that he could experience with Jesus the joy and the exhilaration of walking on water with him. An experience, a joy that would have stayed with him in the hours, the days, the weeks, and the months that followed, because he had done something in those moments that fundamentally the other 11 disciples did not do. He didn't allow his fear, as it were, to completely override him to the degree that he didn't cry out to Jesus. He recognized in Jesus that he could have that joy and that security when he cried out, Lord, save me. Imagine the joy and the exhilaration and the excitement that Peter must have felt when he was walking hand in hand on the water back to the boat with Jesus. A joy, an exhilaration, and an excitement that he would never have had felt had he not gone and faced his fears. Friends, sometimes in order to get to that place of experiencing exhilaration and excitement and joy, spiritually speaking, we sometimes have to face our fears. We sometimes have to just step out the boat and go for it. Be willing to face our fears. Be willing to face the wind. Be willing to, as it were, sink. Be willing to admit failure. Be willing to cry to Jesus in fear for that help. Because it's only by going through that experience often that we can then find the joy and the exhilaration, as Peter did, of walking spiritually on the water with Jesus and engaging that adventure that only Jesus can give us. Feeling fear can affect our joy, but let's not allow our fears to range unchecked. Let's be willing to admit those fears that we have, to cry out in fear to Jesus, because at that moment he will take our hand, and in those moments that follow we can then experience the joy, the excitement, the exhilaration of doing something that we thought was not possible. And in so doing, that will not only bring joy to us, but it will bring joy to Jesus, because we have been obedient in stepping out of the boat. Feeling fear affects joy. Join me tomorrow as we look at our final theme this week in feeling fear, of how feeling fear can affect our relationships.